gosh, that is crazy. I am at Broken River Mining. And then all of a sudden, I looked at this and just look at this opal. It is just, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just like, I'm dying. I'm just dying.
And this gentleman over here is our miner.
Cool, well, I maybe have to talk to him.
Well, come around to the front and let's start at the beginning. So this is a book that my partner Sue put together about 5 years ago. But this book was put together to explain a little bit about the process, where you find it and what you're looking for. So Australia, this area here, the dark shaded area, is the only place in the world that you're going to find boulder opal, which is what you're looking at here on the table. We have 2 mines out here in Western Queensland, which is on the western edge of that field, and that's where we get everything you see on the table has come from one of those 2 mines. But Australia is very famous for its opal fields, okay? And the thing to remember is that Australia opal is all sedimentary. Most of the other opals in the world are volcanic. This big area in here was once upon a time all an inland sea. And the difference is, you may have heard of Lightning Ridge, different to our boulder opal, Cooperpedy, Anamuka. These guys down here on the southern field in South Australia, their sediment came in from Antarctica into the inland sea. So it was salt water. And that's why you often get little shells that are opalized. For us, it was fresh water. So coming into here, both Lightning Ridge and the boulder opal fields, the Winton Formation, is all fresh water. And again, like I said, Australia is all sedimentary opal. Pretty much all the rest of the world is volcanic opal. In this photo, you can see my mining camp. This is the northern mine. You can see that flat top mesa. That was the floor of the inland sea. I'm sure it's weathered away a lot because this here has all weathered away and there's no opal down here. Our opal occurs around about 25 yards underneath the floor of what was the inland sea. And just like Lightning Ridge, Australian boulder opal gets a black opal. This is the opal up here, about 25 yards underneath the flat top mesa. Here's my camp, and as you look out here, that's all cattle and sheep country. There's no opal out there, it's all eroded away. Our second leases are down at Eromanga. As you can see, furthest town from the sea in Australia. Eromanga has a population of about 40 people. It's got a pub and a service station. In Australia, that's about all you need. Okay, and we mine about 60 miles or 40 miles further west than that. So it's very remote. And Australia is a very large country, as big as the United States. And in fact, we have more coastline than the United States has. But this is important. This particular mine here we're looking at, it's weathered away a bit more, but again, the surface here is weathered down from what was the floor of the inland sea. And we're only talking about 12 yards deep here. But my boulders run along here, and there's lots of boulders. When I'm mining, I find lots of boulders, but I don't find a lot of opal. I've gone 3 months one time without finding any opal, and I was starting to question whether I was an opal miner. Okay, but what I'm looking for as the opal miner is I'm looking for these faults. Okay, you see the fault running down there? Because of fluid coming down, infiltrating into my boulder level here. I would always consider I have a much greater chance of finding opal in this zone than I do further away where there's no faults, where the fluid was able to come down. Here's a boulder in situ. You can see it in the red sandstone, the Winton Formation, the only place in the world that you find this. You can see the boulder, the concretion, and you can see the opal in the boulder. We use machinery. We mine above ground. The reason is some of my boulders are quite large. They can be anything from the size of my fist to something like this guy you see over here, even 3, 4, 5 times the size of that. Could weigh anything up to 400, 500, 600 pounds. So what we're going to talk about here is how the boulder forms and how the opal gets its colour, because opal is all about colour. Remember we were talking where the sediment coming into this inland sea, the Winton Formation, there was a row of volcanoes somewhere up near the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. That sediment coming in brought with it some form of organic matter. It may have been a seed pod, a bit of bark, a branch off a tree, something like that, and it settled in the mud down in the bottom of the river, and it was the carbon that was in that piece of organic matter started the attractions from the particles of soil around it, growing larger and larger. Like I've said before, somewhere from about the size of my fist to something that will weigh 400, 500, 600 pounds. So then what happened was this mud ball that grew down in the bottom of the river dried up and the mud ball dried out. When the mud ball dried out, shrinkage cracks occurred in it. Just like you look into the bottom of a lake, you're going to see these shrinkage cracks. And these shrinkage cracks were very important because that fluid coming down, leaching through from the sandstone, picking up all the right trace elements, infiltrated into these voids, cavities, and that's what's produced the oak. So let's have a close look at what we've got here. You can see the beginning of time for this concretion. I don't know, maybe a seed pod, but anyhow, it was organic. And you can see as over time, the concretion grew larger and larger, attracting the particles from the soil around it. You can see the shrinkage cracks occurred as the river dried up. And as you can see here now, you can see where the fluid has started to run into these voids and these cavities, and that's what has produced the opal.
Look at that. Oh, that is beautiful.
Okay.
So, were you surprised when you opened that one up?
Yeah, well, we knew there was something in there. You never know until we start the process of what's really in there. You get a bit of a guide, but we don't normally open them up in the field. But the reason I know it's a fluid is this. If you can look in there, you can see the boulder and you can see how it's filled up with opal. And it's pretty much a perfect water level in there, fluid level. Because when I'm now going to work, when I find a boulder, and remember I'm going to probably find 200 boulders for one that may have colour, and I chip the end of it off, and I see colour, and I chip the other end off, and if you go onto Instagram, you're going to see this when we're out at the mine in the winter months in Australia. And once I know how full the boulder is with opal, because it can vary from only very thin amounts to something a little bit like that one over there, quite thick, I'll then take the top of the boulder off, because there's never going to be any opal in that. Because I've got 1,000 kilometres to cart this guy home, and I don't need to cart anything more in my little truck than I have to. When I get it home, what happens is I reorientate myself with the opal in the boulder and find the level. When I find the level in the boulder, I get it and I turn it up on its edge, and I've got a 16-inch brick saw. And I'm going to bring that blade, it's got a diamond wheel, down on the top edge of the opal, because there'll never be opal in the top end of the boulder. And that exposes all the veins.
Oh, wow, look at that.
I now know where my opal runs within the boulder, down in these veins. And I'm going to get it on the other side now and take thin slices until these veins start to expose themselves on the other side. And then I have my opal between here and there, and I know what I'm working with. I've done that with this guy. You see him? You can see the vein of opal running there, several thin slices on the bottom of it to be able to expose the veins. And if you watch Instagram, somewhere around late November through to mid-January, because mid-January we start to pack up to come to Tucson, you're going to see us processing. So if you ever see the geo pick come out on a boulder, watch the picture. So what we're going to do here is a split. Now this is how we do most of our opal processing after we come back from the mine. We saw it, we expose the veins as best we can on the saw, and then we're going to give it a little tap, as Sam's going to do shortly, to expose the colour to find out what we're working with. Now this bit of opal could be anything from 60 to 90 million years old, and for the first time today you're going to witness this bit of opal see the sun. Okay, Sam, explain what you want to do.
We've already broken down and we've gone as close as possible to the opal vein, and in the vein there's actually a little split there. So it's all naturally formed. So we're just going to help it separate. And with a little tap, hopefully you'll split. You can hear it already. It splits straight away. But there's 2 in this one, so we get 2. This one doesn't want to split. And it did. Okay. Let's see what this one looks like. We don't know. So a little bit open there. And hopefully this one will be a bit better.
Oh, look at the rainbow on that one. That is beautiful.
Wow.
Good job, Sam.
I know.
How about 3 cheers for the opal?
Hip hip hooray!
This is what happens.
Oh, goodness sakes, what a surprise. Oh my. Like I thought the little lines were cool, but look at all those.
Okay, so this is all part of the process of breaking down the boulders to produce what you see up here is beautiful gemstones. Now that I have it like this, there's not much value in here, so I'm going to slice that off so it becomes more manageable. And Sue is going to come along with a marker pen, and she's going to mark out all these gemstones you see in here. On a small saw, she's going to cut them all out, shape them, polish them, and you'll see them up at the front counter.
Wow.
Now, I can't do that job. I'm colourblind.
Oh no, you're colorblind?
I'm colourblind.
How can you tell if the opal has color?
Oh, I can get a rough idea, but
You don't know if it's good or not.
They're not good enough, and I'm not sure. And so I don't do that. You might consider me a lazy male. But while we're talking about opal, how does opal get its colour? Because opal's all about colour.
Right.
Okay, opal is a silica, as is agates, quartz, jasper. Silica is very common in the world. The difference? Opal is the only silica made up of spheres. Right? All them other guys are crystals. The shape of the crystal will determine what it is. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's my opal, Mexican opal, Nevada opal, Ethiopian opal. It's all made up of spheres. These little spheres now work very much like the rainbow. It's a diffraction of light. So you have the light behind you, you look, and those spheres, the raindrops, break up the light rays into the colours. Similar thing happens with my opal. So let's imagine this little bar of opal, this little vein of opal down in here, probably about a 1/16 of an inch thick. So we're looking into that 1/16 of an inch thick layer, and I magnify it probably 100,000 times or so. I try to explain it like this. Because I've magnified it quite a lot, let's imagine I'm looking into that 55-gallon rubbish drum over there, and because I need spheres, I'm going to fill it up with spheres. So let's start with something like a golf ball. So I'll get a bucket of golf balls and I'm going to tip into the drum. I need a sphere a bit larger, so let's imagine I get a baseball. And I get a bucket of baseballs and I tip into the drum. I also need something a little bit larger again. So let's go softballs. And I get buckets of softballs and I tip into the drum, continuing to tip in all these buckets of spheres, these softballs and golf balls, till I get the drum full, which is this opal we're looking at here. So the little guy, the golf ball, he's approximately 200 nanometers in diameter. Very small, very small. A nanometer is 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter, and a millimeter is about a 32nd of an inch. So we're talking very, very small, okay? And if I was just to fill that drum up with just golf balls, none of the other spheres, just golf balls, shine in the light, we're going to see the color blue. And today is the first day that when you look around my table and you see something that only has blue as the color of opal, it's made up of 200 nanometer diameter spheres. Show you what I mean.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. Is that, now that just like is that thin on the edges? Yes. And then the crack, it goes down the crack?
Thinner the better. My opal, the thinner the better. I like it.
That is stunning.
So today, like I said, for the first time in your life, you now know that blue opal is made up of 200 nanometer diameter sphere. Let's talk now about the big guy, the softball. He's about twice the size. He's about 450 nanometers in diameter compared to the golf ball, about twice the size. If I was to fill the drum up with just the softball and I look into it with the light, I'm going to see something like the Mexican opal, the red fire opal you talk about, the volcanic opal, right? But it's going to be the big spheres. But in my case, it has a range of sphere sizes, all different sizes of spheres between those two, between the golf ball, the 200 nanometer, and the 400, 451, there is a range of sphere sizes. And this is where I bring out my pocket stone. Okay. Every opal miner in Australia has a pocket stone. The reason? Friday night we go to the pub. If we're in Eromanga and a few opal miners get around, we're going to start comparing pocket stones. So if you're walking around here and you find someone who says he's an opal miner from Australia, don't be afraid to ask to see his pocket stone.
Oh, wow. And that iridescence then is because the spheres are all different.
Different size. But if you can just focus sort of on one area, and as I move it around, hopefully you can find a spot that changes the colours from blues to greens to golds to reds. Don't know if you can find that spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, that's because in there are all the different size spheres arranged one above the other, but they have to be in bunches of spheres, right, of the same size. And just above or just below is a different size bunch of spheres.
That is fascinating.
Right, now if I was to put the lid on that drum and I roll that drum around and I mix them all up, so now they're never in bunches of spheres, they're just completely jumbled. When I take the light and I shine it into the opal, all you're going to see is what's called potch. It's common opal, has no value. So in my case, I have white potch, blue potch, a honey-coloured potch. And a good example is, if you have a look at this big specimen you see over here, look here, you're going to see bars of colour and then nothing, as in white, and then you're going to see another bar of colour.
Nice.
Can you see it?
Did you just
Some of
about
those are there are
like
pretty
faint
good.
when you saw this one?
Oh, it took a fair while to get this one out. Probably 6 months before we knew what we had.
Wow.
Okay, but that's the potch.
So the white with no color is the
potch. So you can get that in blue, you can get it, for me, in honey colour. You can also get it in white, as you see there. But the famous black opal from Lightning Ridge has a black potch as well. And like I said, the black potch is worthless. But in the case of Lightning Ridge, what has happened is, sitting on top of the black potch, the little spheres have got themselves organised into bunches of the same size, diffracting the colour and popping the colour sitting on the black background. And that's what makes the black opal so famous, is sitting on the black background.
Right.
Now in my case, Boulder opal, we also get a black opal. They're black opals there, they come out of my mine here. Now, how does that form for me? Let me show you. When this concretion was forming, attracting the particles from the soil around it, growing larger and larger. And you can see here the dark lines running through the boulder. The dark lines are manganese. And if I were lucky enough that when the shrinkage crack that occurred in my boulder over here we were looking at before ran down the edge of that black manganese bar, and when it dried, it opened up, the opal came in and rested against that black manganese bar, I will have myself a black opal. Would you like to see a black opal?
I would.
Okay. Now, I've got to be honest with you. This guy is not quite a black opal. There's 9 shades of black, and I'm down a couple of shades from being a perfect black opal, but I'm pretty sure you're going to see what I mean.
Oh my goodness, look at that. That is just spectacular.
Now, remember them guys down in Cooper Pedy we were talking about that have the opalized shells?
Yes.
Right? Those guys are very prolific producers of opal. They probably produce about 80% of the opal onto the world stage. Very prolific producers. But because it's a white milky crystal like this, it has the colours, but it doesn't have the kick. And probably 50, 60 years ago now, might even be a little bit longer. But those guys down there had worked out if they get a thin slither of their crystal opal, and remember the opal's not very big, they're able to put it in their pocket and climb the ladder to get out. But if they was to get that crystal, cut it into very thin slithers, they have a special saw that does it, and glue it to a black back. That's going to give them the imitation of a black opal. They called it doublets and triplets. And when we did it in Australia, way back, we started with things like the black welding helmet lens that you see in the helmet, the glass, a perfect base, and glue a slither onto that, and that was a doublet. And then if you wanted to, you could glue another piece of quartz onto that again and make it a high dome cabochon stone. It's not done in Australia anymore. It's done in China, India. And what they do, and they're much smarter than the Australians, what they do is they get a piece of fine dark ironstone and a slither of that opal from Cooper Pedy, and they bring them about 3,000 miles together and they glue it. I'll show you what I mean.
Rocks in your pocket.
Pocket rock. Okay, this is one here. I don't know if you can handle that one. So when you turn that guy over, you're going to see a bit of my ironstone on the back. Can you see the ironstone? My ironstone on the back, and his slither of opal on the front. Beautiful stones. When I turn them over, you're going to see they both got ironstone on the back. Okay? When I turn this one on its edge, this is the doublet. Okay, hopefully you can get a good picture of that. You can see a beautiful straight line where they glued it together.
Right.
Can you see that straight line? Okay, where the glue is. When I do this one, you'll see where a little bit of opal goes into the ironstone and a little bit of ironstone goes into the opal. Can you see what I mean? Okay, when you're buying an opal online, you must always be very careful. This guy here that's glued together is called a natural opal. Sounds a bit confusing, but it's a natural opal. This one here is a solid opal, where the ironstone and the opal are joined together. You see one going into the other. So just be very wary when buying online, you buy a solid opal. Remember when I said that these guys produce about 80% of the opal that comes onto the world stage?
Yes.
Okay, very prolific producer. Every opal that you buy out of a chain jewellery store is going to be one of these. The reason is, the moment you put a bit of silver around the edge of that stone, you're not going to see the glue line, okay? And if you can't see it, I would doubt if they're going to tell you, okay? But if you buy from a reputable jeweller, they'll be certainly up front, and I'll guarantee you that they're probably never going to sell you a doublet or a triplet or a natural opal. They're only worth a very small amount of what a solid opal is worth. About 10, 15, 20%. They're made by the mile and cut off. They're not valuable. But they're put into jewellery and you would never know. If you're buying an opal, a couple of little tricks to look for when you're buying an opal. Okay, what we should always do is get the opal out from under the bright lights and get it and rotate it around first, and make sure that the colour is looking at you in all directions, okay? Because sometimes opal is only going to look at you one way. And if it looks at you one way instead of all the way around, the price should drop. But why I'm saying get it out from where it sits and rotate it is, I'll guarantee to you that if it's sitting down there on a stand under the lights, with a one-way flash, that one-way flash is looking at you. So that's why you must always turn it around. The other thing is you should always take it away from the bright lights. Take it over into the dark somewhere and have a look at it in the dark. Because these bright lights don't come with you everywhere you go. And sometimes the stone will die 1,000 deaths. Now when you're buying opal, you will notice that the more money you pay, the better it comes. When you pay more money, you can see the standard lifts. And so it should. You know, if you're going to pay more money, you'll see a better quality of stone. Don't knock blue on black.
Are these all boulder opals?
They're all boulder opals.
Oh, that's yours.
This particular tray, though, is different. This particular tray is what's called wood replacement, or crystal opal, or pipe opal. We find this material about 10 feet lower than where we find our boulder opal. And it's a fossilized tree branch, and the fossil is made up of opal. It's a solid opal fossil. Okay, you can see the end of the root in there, the plant. Remember when I was talking about the organic matter coming down in the sediment? So this guy has settled, it's been a tree or a branch or a bush or something like that. Now what has happened is the plant has decayed away, and if you look there very carefully, you can see the striations of the bark. So this particular piece, you can see here the end of the branch or the limb, whatever it was. You can see here where we've polished a little bit of it. Again there. And look closely, you can see the striations of the bark.
Sure. So that must be fairly uncommon to find a limb
It
cast
is.
like that.
Yeah, we find little pieces, more common, but to find a big piece in situ like this is very, very rare. And this is what that pipe opal or that wood replacement that I showed you up the front comes from.
Thanks so much to Ashley and Sue from Broken River Mining for sharing all this awesome information with us. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Kate from Katie Did. Keep on doing.